Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 5 p.m. and we are going to make a prompt start. I see that we have quite a few persons with us this afternoon. Welcome. It's lovely to see all of you. And as I did in the last session, I will just run through some quick housekeeping. Just note that in the event we reach full capacity, your colleagues can also access the session via Facebook, and they can use the chat there. You can also use the chat here. Everyone will be muted on attendance just to ensure that we do not have any interruptions. But in the instances where we will have discussions and we'll be inviting you to participate, to share, once you raise your hand, you will be able to unmute yourself and to share with the rest of us. Again, this is a sharing space. It's a safe space for sharing and for learning. So we do not want to bring in Mr. Blame or Mistress Judgment. They will be left in the waiting room for the duration of this session. All right. So welcome again, and we will get straight into it. So on Monday, in our first session, we reintroduced ourselves to writing. We looked at a few different types of writing that you would have, or you can have in your classroom. We took a brief look at the stages of writing development, of spelling development, and we looked at the connection between reading and writing. Now, at that session, you also shared some of your challenges with writing. And if you would like to add to this, or if you haven't had an opportunity to yet share your challenges, please head over to our Padlet. The link will be in the chat. You can just click on that link. You'll get over to the Padlet. You will see in the bottom right corner, there's a little button for you to just click for you to post, type in whatever your challenges are there. Okay. So what will we be looking at today? We'll be looking at session 2, which is the writer's workshop or the writing workshop, whichever way you want to call it. We will be looking at the format or the structure of that approach. We will be focusing a bit on two things, the mini lesson as well as conferencing for a bit. And I would like, of course, for you to consider what are some of your expectations if you are interested in using that approach. It's encouraged that you use it, that you use some aspects of that approach in your classroom. Okay. So today what I'm going to do is start with your voices. I see I have about 60 persons in the room. I would like to think that someone in this room has used the writing workshop approach. So if you have, I'm not saying, whether it's something that you're using now, if it's something that you tried in the past, maybe you tried it, you stopped, you tried it, you're still using it, you tried it, you saw some success, you tried it, you had a number of challenges. Here is an opportunity for you to share with the rest of us what that experience was like. So is there anyone here who has used the writing workshop and who is willing to share that experience with us? You just raise your hand. I will let you unmute and you can share with us. I will give you maybe a few seconds. Okay, so I take it nobody in this room has used the writing workshop. Well, if that is the case, then I guess you will be hanging on my every word for the next half hour. If you have, and maybe you're a bit shy about speaking up in front of this large group, though I really doubt that, feel free to use the chat and tell us of your experience using the writing workshop in your class. All right, so what we'll do, we'll just move right along. What is the writing workshop? Why would we use it? It is really an instructional approach, right? Now, if you think of instructional approaches, is just a way of doing something. So it's a way, a structure that you would use for the teaching of writing. Some of the principles on which this approach is based is that students learn best by doing. In fact, quite a number of us learn best by doing, if not all of us, right? It is also based on the principle that explicit instruction is needed. Now, what does that mean, explicit? It means that we are telling the students what they need to do, why they need to do it, how they should do it. We are also demonstrating what the student should be doing in action by acting it out, but also by doing think alouds. Now we know what think alouds are. Essentially, we're sharing the thought processes that should be going on in a student's mind as he or she is writing. Explicit instruction is not asking the students to remember something, and it's not prompting them to remember it, and it's not asking them to discover anything, okay? So when we say that students need explicit instruction in some areas, we're saying that they must be told what it is they should do. Oh, I see a comment in the chat that Ron Alexis wanted to comment. So let's pause here and let's hear from Ron Alexis. I'm going to just give you the option to unmute. Am I seeing other hands? Oh, there's your hand. Go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Right. Yes, you are hearing me, right? So
yes.
At my school, I've used the writing workshop in collaboration with another teacher, senior teacher, who actually taught me and many others how to use it. And we use a lot with journal writing, where, excuse my baby's voice, sorry. We use it a lot with journal writing, where the boys would, I teach us at RC Infant for Boys, where the boys would choose a topic and they would work individually, sometimes in pairs, and they would work on their first draft. We would assist them with editing, and then finally they would they would work on a second draft after they had made the corrections, and then they would finish their work. But we use it a lot through journal writing. So I'm not really sure if that's a good example, but that's how we did it.
Okay, did you have a specific structure that you were using for the writing workshop? Okay, I hope you have not lost her.
Right, I was saying, are you hearing me, Miss?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Repeat your question, please. You asked me something.
Was there a specific structure that you were using for that writing workshop?
Not really, because like I said, it was just journal writing and it was for grade kids. So we simply had them, we simply had to choose a topic. Sometimes we would work together as a class, everybody would have the same topic. Sometimes they would have topics in pairs or individually, and they would write, whether it be through drawing or actually writing a sentence. And then sometimes we'll have their pairs to correct them, or we would assist with the correcting, making the editing, and then they'll work on the next draft. There was not really a particular structure that we used. I'm not sure if it is because that it was with kids, but that's what I learned from the teachers. I guess I'm here to learn more.
There you go. Thank you very much for sharing. Thank you very much. And I really like the idea, and that's one of the tenets of the writing workshop, that there is a writing community and the students have pairs with whom they write. So let's just go back and based on the experience that Ms. Alexis has shared, we will see what can be added, what can be adjusted, etc. if you want to change what you're doing, what your writing lessons look like, to something that would be more structured like the writing workshop. So as we said, one of the principles is that students learn best by doing, most of us do, and that explicit instruction is needed. We were discussing that explicit instruction means you are telling students exactly what it is they need, what it is they need to do, why they need to do it, how they need to do it, right? Explicit instruction always assumes that the students don't know and that they must be told. When they are told and then they practice, they will remember, all right? Now, throughout, well, let's run through the others. There's a focus on writing as a process. And of course, if it's a workshop, we know the idea of a workshop is something that goes on for a period of time. You explore something in depth, you go through a process. The routine of the writer's workshop or the writing workshop allows students to anticipate and plan for writing. So as opposed to having no idea when writing is going to happen and how it's going to happen, we know that a lot of children thrive on routine, knowing what is expected, what's going to happen, what the format is going to be. They really love that. And having the writing workshop really allows them to anticipate that, yes, we're going to be doing writing today. And these are the specific things that I would be doing. These are the materials that I'll be using. This is what I'm expecting to learn something, and I'm expecting to do a lot of writing and then, share about my writing, etc. Okay. Overall, this approach will build students' writing confidence over time. And I want to emphasize the over time, right? As we are exploring the writing workshop today, we don't want to be under the impression that we can implement this tomorrow and everything will work perfectly. As you know, there will be some instances where you have to work through. You have to teach students the routines, the processes. You also have to be ready for whatever structure you are putting in place, right? Now, as we go through this session, I am going to be referring to a resource that is at your school. Anybody recognize this book? Just give me a thumbs up if you recognize this book. This book was sent to your schools under the Early Learners Program, right? It's a guide to the writing workshop by Lucy Calkins. Now it says primary grades here. That may be, yes, this text may be saying that, but it is perfectly and completely applicable to the higher grades at the secondary level. Why? Because students still need explicit instruction in writing at that level. They need structured time to write, to share, to reflect on their writing. So since you have this book at your schools, I'm going to refer to some specific chapters and some specific pages. So I'm going to encourage you that maybe as part of your PLCs, your team professional development, you can probably take these a chapter at a time, read, come together with your peers and discuss. Even if you have one other person that you're going to be going through this with, I think that would be encouraging to you. Okay, so we understand that it's an instructional approach. We understand that there are particular principles on which this is based. Let's find out what the different roles are in the classroom, what will be happening, what are the features of this writing workshop. So I've kind of divided it by the student, the teacher, and the classroom itself. So in the writing workshop or during the writing workshop, students are working authors. Remember, we said we want to build their writing confidence. We want them to see writing as a process. We want them to write as authors. All right, they have something to share. There is a process that they're going to go through. They're going to learn as they're going through that process, right? Students are eventually choosing their topics and managing their own writing. And we will see how later when we discuss, tracking student progress, things like using the writing portfolio, the writing process, etc. See how from session to session you can link some points to others to make sense of what your writing classroom would look like. From the teacher perspective, the teacher is also a writing professional. Now, I mentioned earlier that you're creating a writing community in your class, right? You are a member of that community as well. So you are the writing professional. So one of the things we can't do is teach if we don't know how to do it, right? So we must be writers as well. And if perhaps you need some practice, some sessions where we just explore writing, being teachers as authors, let me know. We will set up a few sessions where we can do that, where we can look at writing, not just stories, but writing informational text, writing poetry, writing songs, and so on. So you are also a writing professional, but you are a peer coach. You are guiding the students' writing, right? The teachers, you are writing with your students and you're sharing your own work when students are sharing their work as well. That's the whole idea of you being a writing professional and a mentor here. The classroom itself. Now the whole class lessons are very short. They're focused on one element that you want to share with students that they will later be applying during the writing workshop, right? The emphasis on this approach is writing itself. You know how sometimes we say we have reading lessons and there are hardly any opportunities for students to read. So for writing, the writing workshop, the emphasis is on writing, and we'll see how the timing and structure of the workshop really reflects that, right? There is an emphasis on sharing with the class, on conferencing, on editing, and on having a wide variety of writing pieces, text ideas in a portfolio, right? And here's the word portfolio again coming up. Why is that emphasis on sharing? Let's go back to the first point we made under the student. The student is a working author, right? Do authors write to hide in a folder at their homes? No. They are writing to share with an audience, okay? So that is why the sharing part is so very important. So let's take a look at a simple graphic, which helps us to see what the structure or the format of the writing workshop looks like. So I'll give you a second to just look at it. Pay attention to the time, the balance of time that's been used in the writing workshop. Notice it's just 10 to 15 minutes for a mini lesson. And that for 35 to 45 minutes, you have writing. That's the focus on writing that we were talking about. So students are doing independent writing and teachers are supporting the writers, right? And you can see some of the things that the teacher will be doing while the students are writing. While students are writing, they're trying out strategies. They're learning, they're applying something that they learned from the mini lesson. They're going through the writing process. They're maybe working with pairs, the way that Miss Alexis mentioned that you have students writing, you know, in pairs or even small groups, right? They may be exploring different pieces because really these students as authors are the ones deciding how it is they're going to be working. And as a teacher, now you may be working with individual students or small groups. Interestingly, during that time, you may be passing on additional instruction to students who may need some support in those small groups, right? You are also making notes of what students are doing. That is how you track the progress that they're making in the writing workshop. That's how you determine what it is your mini lesson is going to be about, because you are constantly making notes on the students and conferencing with them. The last 5 minutes or so of the workshop is for sharing, right? And you can have whole group sharing. You can use the author's chair where one person is sharing what they've written, etc. Now we'll go a little more detail into the writing, the mini lesson. If you want to read up on the structure of the workshop, read through chapter 6 of your Lucy Calkins text, all right? Please be aware, yes, it's written in a context that's different from ours. Read with that lens, but you want to make sure that as you are implementing at a reasonable pace, right? Pace yourself, ensure that you have all the structures that you want in your class, considering the context that you're working with, so that you manage your own expectations. Now, you will adjust the time allotments based on your students' level, right? Over time, you want to build your students' writing stamina. So clearly, you know, you have a grade K class or you have a group of students who aren't very enthused about writing. You would want to build up the time that they spend writing from lesson to lesson or from week to week, however it works out best for your students, right? You always want to consider what you know about your students as you're planning. Now, for that mini lesson, the area of focus that you would highlight in that mini lesson can come either from the curriculum in the form of, you know, a new skill that the students need to learn, or it can come from the students writing. So as you observe what students write, you read, you conference with them, you'll be making notes about, what it is you notice maybe some of the areas that you may need to touch on as a whole class, right? The mini lesson is for the entire class. So it really has to be something that the entire class will benefit from. Otherwise, you have students who are just, when am I going to start writing? I don't need to listen to this. I know this already. When am I going to start writing? Now, during the mini lesson, it's a good time to refer to mentor texts with students, right? Using that text to highlight whatever element you're going to focus on in the mini lesson, right? So let's say you want to focus on how to develop ideas because you find your students aren't really doing that very well. Clearly, if your mini lesson is 10 minutes, you may not be able to read an entire text with the students, or you may have read that text previously with the students. You come back to that text and say, notice in this text how the writer does so and so, right? During that mini lesson, you are the one doing that instruction. Use the mentor text for students to see how that's developed. You can even use another, if there's writing, there are writing pieces already available in the class, or even your own, you can use that as a mentor text to highlight the element that's the focus of the mini lesson. Now, tomorrow we will see how the traits of writing can fit in here and how that mini lesson can be used at each stage of the writing process, which we will look at in the subsequent lesson. Now, you notice work time is the bulk of the lessons. You will know that students will be at different places in their writing as time progresses. So you need to have some kind of status check to see where students are before they begin work time. Now, here's a quick suggestion. I know you are very creative. Maybe you can have color codes that they place on their desk to inform you whether they are still drafting, whether they're now revising, whether they're editing, whether they need help, whether they would like to work with a pair, whatever it is. You have to set up your own system so that your students can, so that at the beginning of every writing time or work time, you know where students are, whether it's something that they fill out on a board, or just something that they put on their desk to let you know. All right. We mentioned that the teacher is also the writer, right? During that conferencing time, there are specific questions and feedback. Feedback is very, very important, right? And the way that we give the feedback is important. Telling the student, okay, this is wrong, correct it. That's not feedback, that's just identifying an issue. Feedback, you have to let the student know how to work through that issue. You also want to ensure that student ownership of the writing is maintained. So the kinds of questions that you ask and the way that you give suggestions it must always be up to the student what he or she wants to put into that text, especially in terms of content, right? The share time is very important. Students are understanding that texts are created for an audience. Now, share time is also a wonderful time for students to reflect on how they were able to apply the teaching point for the day, or how their journey as a writer is progressing. So they can talk about, I was able to use this teaching point, whatever the point is, or I was able to develop my ideas in my writing today because I used this, I did this, I did that. Today was a really difficult day for me as a writer. I just could not get my ideas out on the paper, but I think it's okay. I was able to do so and so. Reflection is very, very important for retention. All right. And keep in mind, all of this is to create a community of writers and to create support, right? Now, the actual parts of the mini lesson, there's a part, the first part is called the connection. The second is called the teaching point. There's active engagement, and there's a link point at the end. If you want to read up more on that, there's also, I think the chapter is chapter 6 or 7, maybe 7, 6 or 7 in the text, but I'll let you know in a bit. All right. Now, the connection portion of the lesson, just very before I run through what each of these is, I can just share with you a short video by Lucy Perkins as she talks about the importance of the mini lesson in the writing workshop.
So it's really important what you asked about why mini lesson. One of the things that we know is important is that kids need explicit instruction in the skills and strategies of good writing, but they also need time to practice. So we've deliberately written this series so that the mini lessons are just 10 minutes. And so for example, let's say we're studying a mentor text. We're not apt to read that whole text in one day. Instead, we'll take a text and we'll look at the lead and just talk about those first 3 or 4 sentences in one day's mini lesson. And another day we'll come back and look at that text again, and this time we'll mine it for something different. And another time we'll come back and look at it yet again. So the mini lessons are really carefully calculated to be 10 minutes. And I know as teachers get kind of skilled at doing mini lessons that sometimes they're 12, 13 minutes, they're a little bit longer. But one of the things to encourage people to do is to make sure that they keep the pace going and keep those mini lessons brief, because the essence of teaching writing is not just the mini lesson, but it's actually the small group work. And in every session of these books, there's a mini lesson, but then there's guidance for what's the small group work look like, and what do you actually expect the kids are doing on their own, and then how do you respond to the predictable problems the kids are going to be getting into on their own. So that each day has a 10-minute mini lesson, then has some advice for small group work and conferring, and then a little bit of a follow-up at the end, which also leads into homework.
Okay, so here we have it, the rationale for the mini lesson and why the mini lesson needs to be focused. That's really the only, in St. Lucia, we usually do a lot of talking in our lessons, and we wonder why at the end of the day we're exhausted. Well, with the writing workshop, you have 10 minutes in which to do all of your teaching to the entire class, right? The bulk of your time will be spent working with small groups and individual students. Now, as you're going through this mini lesson, what's the first thing you do? For that connection, it could be within 1 minute or so, you may be activating students' prior knowledge, you're helping them make connections. You're giving them a rationale for what you're about to teach them, and you're helping them to understand why that is important, right? Now, at the end of that connection portion, you want to say, as you may remember, we did so-and-so, right? Yesterday we did so-and-so. You want, as we mentioned, you've done a read aloud of a book that's a mentor text. You want to, during the mini lesson, refer back to that text and say, remember when we read so-and-so? Well, I want to show you today how the author did, how the author accomplished this, right? As we're going through this, think about how you can use this strategy in your own writing. Or if you're doing a think aloud or you're demonstrating something, pay attention to what I'm doing so that when you get to your own writing, you can try it out as well, right? In that teaching point, it's really where you're demonstrating whatever that skill is or that idea is. You want to do it step by step, and you want to introduce each step when you're being explicit with what you're saying, all right? That's students. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you develop the big idea in your story. Notice how I do so-and-so. Notice how I do this. This is what we should do next, right? So remember, explicit, step by step. What is helpful is to have an anchor chart that can demonstrate or outline the steps that you would have followed in that mini lesson. And it's there for students to refer to it again, all right? That again means we'd have to create some charts. If you have something that you can display in your class, whether it's a screen or so on, that screen can be up so that students can refer to it during the practice session. That teaching point that you're focusing on in your mini lesson, you want to repeat it at least 3 times. Why? Because you really want them to remember that that's what the teaching point is. And you don't want to just tell them to do it. You want to show them how to do it. In the active engagement portion, that is where the students will be trying out the skill or the strategy or the procedure for themselves, right? You can say, okay, I've showed you how to do this. Now you can try it out, okay? Or you try it out, let me see how you do, right? They can either do this individually or they can do it with a partner. It depends on what on what that skill is or that procedure that you're teaching them. All right. At that point, we may be tempted to kind of, stop there and give corrections and clarify things for students and have everybody share. That is not really the point of the mini lesson, right? You don't have to let every child share. You don't have to clear up every clarification. Because your teaching point is so focused on just that one thing, and because you have explained it and demonstrated it so clearly, the majority of your students should be able to get it, right? At the end of that mini lesson, all you have to do is do a check for understanding. Students can do the thumbs up if they understand, I'm not clear, I have no idea what's going on. And then you can always say, okay, those students, those of you who need some further explanation, come with me over here. You do some further explanation with those students, okay, if necessary. But of course, we want to make sure that our first option is to be as clear and as simple as possible so that all of our students can follow, all right? And that link that closes off your mini lesson is where you want to repeat your teaching point and let the students know that you didn't just teach that because you have to teach, but it's something that they're going to apply in their writing, and it's something that they're going to keep in their writing toolbox that they could use whenever they write, right? So remember, you can use this strategy today, and you can use this strategy anytime that you are writing, all right? Again, you can have that up on your chat so that as they're implementing during that writing period, they have an idea of what teaching point they're working on. All right, we're going to post a link so you can watch some additional information on the mini lesson and some reading material as well. All right, on how you can go about planning and teaching for the mini lesson. Let me just pause here and check the chat to see if there's anything there that we can share. I'm also encouraging you to check the chat as well because some great ideas are being shared there. Okay. A question about the book. I'm pretty sure every school has it. Check in your library, see if it's hiding somewhere there among the other books. All right, but I think my colleague put the name in the chat as well. Yes, we have gotten to our 100 participants on Zoom. So if your colleagues are trying to come on, please send them over to Facebook. I think someone mentioned on Facebook, Tessa mentioned on Facebook that she has a chat with pockets labeled with the writing stages and the names on popsicle sticks. Oh, that's fantastic. So they can actually move their names into whatever stage they're at, so that's a great status of the class that as a teacher you can use, right? So the students feel they're really in control of this process. They can move their sticks and say, okay, I'm at this stage, or I need help. I put my stick in this slot in the chat and so on. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Osman. That's perfect. So here we have it already. So you may want to check out the Facebook chat as well because it seems some good information is coming through there as well. The text looks like this. Okay, it's a guide to the writing workshop, primary grades by Lucy Corkins. If you're a secondary school teacher, you may not have one, but if you want to borrow one, you can always let me know, okay? Or you can always purchase it online as well. I think it's a really good resource that you can use in your teaching, okay? Wonderful. Okay, so let's.
So it's
right. So we did quite a bit of discussion on what those various points are. Remember that you want to keep your mini lesson focused. Now, here's the thing, people. Yes, we're talking about this for writing, but as we will see tomorrow and and next Monday, as we look at a couple other approaches, you can use a mini lesson for teaching reading the same way. You know, when you're teaching students specific reading skills, you can use the mini lesson. As you go through the writing process, you can use mini lessons. As you explore the different traits that you want students to use in their writing, you can use the mini lesson. The mini lesson is just, there's just a particular format and particular things that you do. You use it for whatever is most effective. The other aspect that I want to just touch on briefly is conferencing and feedback during the writing workshop. That's the bulk where students are working. I put a few questions here that you can ask yourself as you are thinking about how to conference with students, right? You can check out chapter 6, pages 55 to 56 gives a quick overview of the conferencing activities, but there's an entire chapter, chapter 8, that really explains and answers some questions that you may have about conferencing. Now, as students are working, you're moving around the room, helping students showcase what successes they've had in writing. You're giving them assistance in areas that are challenging them or troubling them, all right? What you want at the end of that conference is that there are specific strategies that your students understand they can use in future writing. So as you're conferencing with them, as you support them through whatever challenge or trouble that they have, you help them see at the end of that little conference, and it could be 1 minute, 2 minutes, you help them see, so today you learned how to do so and so, you can use this whenever you're writing, or whenever you come to, let's say you're doing editing, whenever you come to a word that maybe you are finding a little challenging to spell, remember the strategies that you use today, you can do A, B, C, D, and you will be successful in that area, right? As we mentioned, you can gather small groups of your students to give additional support or give additional instruction, right? This is kind of like, you know, that guided reading we've been talking about on the ELP. Guided writing is the same idea too. Because you have been keeping track of how students have been doing as they're writing, you know what some of their challenges are, and you can say, okay, Shirley, Shan, Diane, can you work with me for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes? You pull up these students and you provide some additional instruction, some additional support, you ask them questions, and voila, they can go on with their writing. Since you have this amount of time, this block of time for students to write, obviously you will want to conference with more than one student or more than one group. You will not be able to conference with everybody at the same time. So of course you have your schedule for every writing workshop, which groups you're going to work with or which individual students. You want to make sure that you've seen everyone over a particular cycle. Now on the side of the screen here, I've put 4 questions to ask the writers. I really like this because it allows ownership of the writing to remain with the students, right? So as you conference with students, you come up to a student, you ask, how's it going? Great question, right? When people ask us that, are they asking us any specific thing? We are free to tell them what it is we want, right? If the student gives you an answer, you can say, can you tell me a little more about that? Can you say a little more about that? All right. When you want to give them an idea that they may want to implement, because again, you want the ownership to be on them, would you consider, or do you think it would be a good idea? Or what direction were you thinking of going with this? Get them to give you suggestions. You'd be surprised at the suggestions they would give you, right? And then you could ask, what do you think about doing so and so? You don't want to say, well, do so and so. Would you think about doing so and so? Right away, you're letting the student know that they are the ones in charge of their writing. And are you ready to try this? So now that you've gone through that little point with them, are you ready to try this in your writing? Okay, then you can move along with your writing. You can see clearly that this requires some patience, right? And not thinking that you'd be able to get through all of the students in the 30 minutes that they're writing, if it's 30 minutes. For those of you with really early learners, like grade K and grade 1, you're probably watching the screen like, Selby, Kaglin Kadia Shaiba, conference with the students. What the other students doing? Look, I will put in a video there with an example of conferencing with early learners, and you will see the kinds of questions that the teacher can ask. There, I'm also putting in some other links with a conferencing guide, kind of, with some ideas of questions you can ask and what you can do during the conferencing stage. But again, read chapter 8 of your fantastic text that you have at your school. All right, moving along quickly. What would you need to do to implement the writing workshop? Again, chapter 5 explains that to you in detail. Now, please, as you're reading the text and you're thinking of how I can implement, use your knowledge of your own context. You know what time you have, you know what resources you have, you know your students, not guessing about them. You have actual information about your students. Use that to make a decision on how you're going to design your writing workshop. What amount of time you're going to use for the work time or the writing time to begin with, and how you're going to build that up over time. All right. I would say, if you can meet with your peers to plan and get ideas for your writing workshop, like what should we do? Where should we start? If you can even co-teach with someone until you're both comfortable, that's a great idea as well, right? But chapter 5 really gives you some specifics about, organizing the environment, et cetera. Now, people, we do not have to go all out and have every single resource before we start. Some persons may not have a lot of space. I think one person mentioned in their challenges with writing that, creating centers because of the limited space is a challenge. So clearly you have to think around that. How can I use the space that I have? I will not be able to set up centers. Do I need to have some portable centers, right? That when we have writing, we have a particular routine on how we can set up the class and have centers. Are we using color codes? What are we using? What management method are we using to structure that? All right. So I will suggest 2 things. Discuss with your peers. All right. I will say, read a chapter is not going to take you that long. It's actually interesting reading. I know that text looks a little, dense, but it's interesting reading. You're reading with a purpose. Read through your chapter, discuss, co-plan, and co-teach with someone. It could be at the same grade level. It could be at a higher grade level, a lower grade level. It doesn't matter. The 2 of you are interested in doing this, you will find a way to do it. Now, I'm already 2 minutes over time, so I'm begging you for maybe about 5 more minutes. I pulled up one of the challenges that a teacher put in the Padlet for us. And again, if you want to share your own challenges with writing, hop over to the Padlet, add your thoughts. You might have to put in the link there again for those of you who have come in after we put in the initial link. But go in there and put in whatever challenges you have. You can even comment on other people's challenges as well. If you want to give them suggestions, you can go ahead and do that. So we don't have 10 minutes, but is there anyone, based on what it is we've run through there in the last few minutes, who can say how the writing workshop can possibly help this teacher? He or she says the difficulty trying to attend to several individuals or group of students at different points in their writing development. Very valid concern. What suggestion, based on our discussion, would you give this teacher? Let me see if I see any hands. I am going to be pulling up the actual challenges that you put in there for each of the sessions and see if we can have a quick discussion about it. Use your raise hand feature. Okay, I see Miss Alexis again. Go ahead, Miss Alexis. I think you should be able to
I'm thinking maybe students can be grouped according to their abilities, and also students can be grouped according to your focus point for them. So for example, you have group A where your focus may be on probably using the correct punctuation marks. Probably the next group might be spelling. So it can really guide you as to how, excuse me, my daughter, sorry. It can really guide you as to how you go about attending to the different groups as opposed to being helter-skelter everywhere. So if you know table A, your focus is spelling, so I guess you address that issue at the time and then move to the next table with the next objective.
Yes, wonderful. And tell your baby, thank you very much for the contribution as well. We really appreciate it. And she's correct, he or she's correct. Now, here's another interesting thing. You know, your students like to know what's going on as well. So why not create a schedule to let your students know when you'll be seeing them for the conferencing? You know, if again, if we use Tessa Osman's idea of students indicating what stage they're at, then you can also indicate to the students with whatever means who you'll be seeing that day. If you have that chart that tells you where each student is, then as Miss Alexis is saying, you would know what the most urgent needs are, and you can always attend to these. But you also want to make sure, based on your student list, that you're seeing every student once in that cycle of conferencing, not the day that you're conferencing, but if you have, 3 writing workshops for the week, that by the end of the week, you have seen every student, you've spoken to every student. All right. If you have any other suggestions, again, you will see this challenge in the Padlet. You can always share some ideas with her by commenting on her post. All right. Thank you so very much, folks. Oh, I see a hand is up. Yes, Miss Charles.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I take the different stages in the writing development to mean 2 things. One, that there are some students who are writing at sentence level, those who are ready for the paragraphs. And 2, I take it as those who are different stages of the writing process. So there are 2 different things that you kind of have to manage there. One thing I may do, I normally probably have some closed paragraphs for the in-betweeners and allow the others to probably just do a fill in the blank sentence activity. And with the others, try to go ahead with having them to understand paragraphing and those kinds of things. So it really depends on planning, how well you plan for your students and knowing them and understanding what their needs are. That's my contribution.
And it's a very good one. Thank you very much for that. We also want to remember that over time, we are doing what? We're building students' confidence in their writing. So we should be actually expecting struggles in the beginning, but we're also not expecting everybody to move at the same speed. And, as Ms. Chas is very correctly saying, it could be in their writing, the stage of writing, they're differing there, or there are different stages of the writing process, as in developing a text, right? So it really requires you to have several pairs of hands and, a brain that's just working in 10 different directions, no doubt about it. But as we've said again, pace yourself, be reasonable in your own expectations of what can happen in the class. And remember that this is happening over time and not at once, not all at once. Now, I really wanted to make sure I stuck to my 40 minutes. We have 8 minutes over 40 minutes, Salah. So I'm going to tell you what it is we'll be doing in the next session, right? In the next session, we're going to be looking at the 6 traits. There's an extra one, but there are 6 traits. We're going to look at those traits, what they are. I actually want to spend some time looking at each and then talking about how you can use mini lessons to help students develop each, and then see how the traits can be incorporated into your writing workshop. So look out for that. I have a quick poll that I want to, I love the polls at the end of the session. So I just want to send out that quick survey, just 3 questions, and you just have to, select your answers. If you're not seeing the poll, it's probably because you may be using an older version of Zoom. That's okay. All right, so I have launched the poll. Give me an idea of how this session went for you. If maybe I was a little too fast, I will see. All right, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the points that you shared. Thank you very much to those who, were engaged in the chat on both on Facebook and on Zoom. And I will see you all tomorrow at 5. Okay, I see people said they need some more information. Okay, so we still have a couple persons who may be not sure that this approach is useful for their students. Might it be because they're either at the grade K level or at the secondary level? But maybe do a little more reading again on it. I mean, the information is available online. There are videos, there are handouts and so on that you can read. So check them out and see, spend some time exploring the approach a bit and see what might be useful. It could be the routine that's useful to your students. It could be the mini lesson aspect of things that would be really useful to your students. But whatever it is, see what it is you can use to, just add to your repertoire. Okay, there's a question. How can we adapt if we teach online? Interesting question. So if you're teaching online, can you still do a mini lesson? Can you still have engagement? Now, if you look at this session, for instance, how do we see whether people are engaged? By inviting them to participate, right? By inviting them to either comment, use the chat, use reactions. So you can still have your mini lesson done online, just that the materials that you'll be using will be different. You may have to use something like a whiteboard if you want to demonstrate how to do something. Now, one of the tips you will get as you're reading up on the writing workshop is that because the mini lesson is very short, if you're demonstrating things, you may want to have materials prepared ahead of time, right? So like if you want to say, this is how we go about writing this sentence, you may have the sentence already written out and you want to demonstrate which part of the sentence you want them to pay attention to. All right? But you can definitely adapt it for online. And you can have students working in their breakout rooms if they're working in small pairs on their writing task, and they would use interactive, collaborative software tools like, if it's a Google document or something like that. Yeah. We will talk about editing in the writing process. Okay, so that's on Monday. Tomorrow we'll talk about the 6+ traits, but Monday we will talk about the writing process. If you want to see the session again, you can always head over to Facebook. It will be there as long as that account is up. All right. I will, at the end possibly of this week, get the slides in a PDF for you, put everything in a shared document and share the link with you probably by tomorrow. Okay. Thank you again. Have a good evening, everyone.